Daf is Mem in Yevomos, and the Gemara is talking about the limud that Rava machlekes really between how to learn the brisa according to Abba Shaul or to the Chachamim about whether Yibum, when it comes back, the mitzvah that whether what it means that it came back, what would have been the Isser. And the Gemara makes a comparison, or really asks and says, according to Rav, it'd be good based on the beginning of that brisa. I just want to focus on that a little bit. That's the beginning of this stuff. It starts at the end of Lamed Testament base. Emaresha mitzvah matzah is teyacha b'makim kadesh mitzvah. So this is in Karban Mincha. The pasuk says, "V'hani seres man yochel ha'aravon of matzos te'achel b'makim kadesh." That the shiori menachos. You can move it over a little bit. Just move the table over a little so you can see it. Maybe less light for you. No. So the pasuk says that shiori mincha v'aneseres mana, whatever is left over of the mincha. So you take a kaimitz, the kohen takes a kaimitz, and he puts it on the mizbeach. And so there's a mitzvah. So the Gemara says the same. The brisa says the same cheshbon at the top of Mem Amud Aleph. Shebetchila haisalav heter mechlal heter. At first, yeah, he can eat it however he wants it. This is bechlal heter. He has a right to eat it as is. Nesra v'chazav. But once it was donated, it was hukdash as a mincha. So it was hukdash. So then only you have to do them the carbon first. And then chazav v'hutar. Then it became hutar. How would it become heter? Once the kohen took out the kamitza, and he takes the kamitza on the mizbeach, which is the equivalent of spritzing the blood on the mizbeach. So this is in menachos, the kamitza is the equivalent of shchita, and the putting the kamitza on the mizbeach, that's the equivalent of the zrika sadam. That's the avodah, and then the kohen gets to eat. Chazer v'hutra yachal tachzil latera rishon tamalei matzos te'achel b'makim kadosh. So we have the matzos te'achel mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. Now the Gemara explains Bishlam and Rava the way Rava learned the same thing by Yibum, that it's not only according to Abba Shaul, it's the Chachamim. So then it makes sense over here. Mitzvah means that when it came back to the mitzvah that it was that the heter that was there beforehand and the mitzvah. So Bishlam and Rava the Amahamani Rabbanan he by Yibum. So Hacha Kama. So over here it's similar. It says Matzos te'achel b'makim kadosh mitzvah, that you eat it b'makim kadosh. The mitzvah meaning shebetchila hisala b'chlal heter ratza ichla ratza ein ichla. At first, if he wanted, he can eat it, and when he doesn't eat it, like that's any flour, anything. If you're off carbs, you're not going to eat it. If you're on carbs, you're going to eat it. That's it. It depends what diet you're on, and there's a heter to eat it or not to eat it either way. Then when you makdish it, nesra, it became asa. Chazra v'hutra, and then once the kohen took the kamitza, it went back to being mutter. So then you can think maybe it goes back to the original heter, and if you want, you can eat it. And if you don't want, you don't have to eat it. But so the Gemara says, what do you mean? He has a choice not to eat it. It can't be. It says already that the kohen would have to eat it, and which causes the kapara. So you see that in order for the kapara to happen, it has to be the kahanim eat it. Now there's a kasha here. There's a kasha here because menachos don't come for kapara. Menachos don't come for kapara. So there's a whole handlorai. There's a real a sugya on when this idea that we say that malamet shekahanim oichem and bailam eskaprim, is that only for chatas and asham, or even an oila, or is it even for kachim kalim, for shlamim? Rashi holds for sure. Rashi elsewhere, Psachim and elsewhere holds that even for kachim kalim, for a shlamim, there's the idea that the kohen has to eat it in order for the carbon to have kapara, whatever level kapara, whatever type of the equivalent of kapara would apply. But by mincha, it wouldn't. Where is the mincha? So Rashi says over here, es hakotchim. Rashi says taka. It's talking about kotchim, not mincha. Va'achlo isem es hakotchim asher kupa behem. To bring the kapara. Ki hecha to have a kapara shleim in order to have a complete kapara. So I want to point out, work on the word shlema and point out a word here. But malamet shekana meichlam and bailam miskaprim. Ella. So what then does it mean? Ella ratza hu eichla ratza koyin acha eichla. Perhaps he doesn't have to eat it. Any koyin can eat it. Talmud leimar matzah te'acham makim kodesh, that he has to eat. Now Rashi says, before Rashi, ratza hu koyin shavad avedasa. The koyin that did avodah, he's the one that has to eat it. Rashi holds that there is going to be a chiyuv in the koyin himself that did the avodah to eat at least some of the mincha. That's separate from the concept of the concept that in order for the carbon to be completely effective, it has to be that the koyin that a koyin ate, but that wouldn't have to be that koyin. Tosfos disagrees over here, at least in part. Tosfos says it could be that it doesn't mean that particular koyin, could be one koyin of the mishmar. There's other Tosfos that says that could be that koyin itself. Other kind of mishmar, could there be a shlichus that the other kahanim can eat b'shlichusai? Normally we would say for eating you can't have a shlichus. No such thing as a shliach. Eat matzah for me. Can't eat matzah for me because that's a mitzvah shebegufay. Can only do a shlichus in a mitzvah that's not mitzvah shebegufay. But a mitzvah shebegufay, you can't put on tefillin for me because that's a mitzvah shebegufay. It has to be done by me. So how can the kohen say eat it for me? So other kohanim are eating for me. But that's only true if you learn that the mitzvah is for the kohen to eat. But if the mitzvah is that the kohen who did the avodah, chelik of the avodah is to complete it, to bring it to be eaten. So he says, you eat it for my chiyuv, not from it. The mitzvah is not for him to eat it, but rather for him to make sure that it is eaten. And that's what the shlichus would do. Then it wouldn't be a mitzvah shebegufay, then it would be a mitzvah for the chefza, and it could do it. There's a big discussion on this point. Tosfos over here, top Tosfos. Well, Tosfos didn't say everything I just said. Tosfos just said that it could be that it doesn't have to be him. It could be the Beis Av or the Mishmar. Tosfos elsewhere says that Kollel or Zaken, then the kohen would eat it b'shlichusai. So Tosfos and Sukkah, Tosfos later in Daf Tzadi Tes on the base, and so there. How would you learn that there is a shlichus? If it's a mitzvah on him to eat it, right? So that's what I was saying, that Tosfos would hold that the mitzvah is not for him to eat the carbon, right? That's it. It needs to be eaten. But the Rambam over here brings the source for the kohen. Well, first of all, the Rambam doesn't bring that there is a mitzvah on the kohen to eat this. So it could be he holds like Tosfos that it doesn't have to be the kohen; it could be anybody. Right? It could be anybody of the kohanim. It doesn't have to be him himself. That and he would hold like Tosfos. But it's not so clear. The Beis Halevi holds for sure that the Rambam holds that there is a mitzvah on the kohen to eat even a mincha, not only a carbon, but even a mincha, which is not for kapara. There is a mitzvah to eat it, and the Aruch HaNer already brings that the mitzvahs achila of menachos is different than the mitzvahs of achila of a regular carbon. A regular carbon we learn from va'achlo es shekupa behem. The pasuk says that in order to have the kapara, there's going to be the kohen's going to have to eat it, and that's going to affect the kapara, and we'll see in a moment from Rashi what the eating is, what role it plays in the kapara. But it has to be that you're going to eat it. But our Gemara seems to say that the source for it is v'achal asher kupa behem. But the Rambam brings the source, really the beginning of the brisa, which is matzah te'achal b'makom kadosh, that it says over there, that Aaron and Avanav have to eat it. The Achrayim ask that in that particular case it was by the inauguration, it was by the Hakamas HaMishkan. So there Moshe acted as Kohen and Aaron and Avanav were actually the Leviim. So why how do you learn from there that the Kohanim eat it? But Lamaisa, the Gemara does learn it from there, probably because the lashon of the Aaron Avanav is usually the term for Kohanim. If it was just happened to be the Leviim, then it would just say Aaron should eat it, or it should be Nechal by Leviim. The fact that it says that Yochel is Aaron Avanav, that usually would mean a din in kahuna. In any case, that's what the Brisa learns, that it is a din in kahuna. And the Aruch LaNer explains that the Rambam Taka learns that there's two separate dinim. The din of achila in menachas, since there is no kapara. By menachas there is no kapara. That's a separate din. There is the din of eating karbanos, every carbon, because that's a chelik of the kapara, is that the blood has to be spritzed on his back. You'd have to do zrika. And besides for the zrika, there's also that the kahanim, by eating, are going to affect the kapara. But menachas are not a carbon of kapara. So that's a separate din. So there you can have a separate din, that there is a separate pasuk from this brisa here. That's why the brisa says, I would have thought that really, you go back, if you want, you eat it. If you don't want, you don't eat it. Because there is no specific mitzvah of asher kupa behem. So why does the Torah say that the Aaron Avanav are going to eat it? A separate din, that menachas also there's a mitzvah to be eaten, not by the specific kohen, as the Rambam doesn't bring that, but it has to be eaten. And Rashi would hold the specific kohen has to eat it. But no, not for kapara. That's if it was kapara, then we would learn it from Asher Kupa Man. It's a separate din. Correct, because menachas don't come for kapara batzim, right? Menachas are just a part of another carbon. If it's a part of another carbon, that's why we have a separate pasuk to tell you that mitzvah, you can't just choose not to eat it. There is a mitzvah to eat it, either you or either the kohen or. What's the purpose of eating it? A separate mitzvah, a mitzvah of shiori. It's sort of like a Pesach. Pesach is not like a para. Pesach that's a chelik of the mitzvah. It's a separate mitzvah in the carbon that, besides for the part that goes on the mizbeach, the rest, the shiur menachas have to be eaten. We know by menachas also there's a mitzvah that there has to be shiur. It has to have a shiur. If there's no leftovers, then it's not a kosher mincha, right? So that chelik is that it has to be eaten by the kohen. That's a mitzvah by the kohen. Now, if you look at Rashi throws in a word here. By va'achlo eisan, it's a first narrow line in Rashi. Va'achlo eisan es hakachem asher kuba behem ki heichid et have kapara shalema. In order for that, the kapara should be a complete kapara. Now, the simple reading of the pasuk, and the way you would understand the Gemara, is that there is no kapara until the kahanim eat it, right? The eating of the kohen eating it creates the kapara. Now, the Mikdash David says that it's an impossibility. You can't learn that the eating of the kahanim is what affects the carbon. He has many rayas. One raya he brings is, he says that the halacha is that when somebody gets a death penalty, somebody did a capital crime, and he does tshuva and he gets a death penalty, so he brings a chatas, he brings a carbon, and and the blood of the carbon is spritzed on him before he's Yotzei Lehari. Now, the spritzing of the blood makes sense, but the kohen can't eat it until after the misa. After the misa, he can't get a kapara. If the kapara happens by the kohen eating it, it's too late. And why we're spritzing blood on him if anyhow the kapara is not going to take effect yet? So he understands that really the kapara is by the zrika sadam, as we would understand that the zrika is the maisa that does the kapara. The eating of the carbon is the time, the moment that the kapara takes effect, but it takes effect retroactively at the time of the zrika sadam. With that, he explains also the avodah of Yom Kippur. The avodah of Yom Kippur, the Kohanim didn't eat on Yom Kippur. When the Kohanim eat the carbon, only Matzah Yom Kippur. So how did Matzah Yom Kippur, the Kohanim eat it, and the kapara happened on Yom Kippur? That's for sure, right? The Kohanim, right? You're learning Yoma, right? So the Kohanim, what? It finished, Gavaldik, right? So the Kohanim are eating a Matzah Yom Kippur, and the avodah which happened at Yom Kippur is causing the kapara. So he says it's really only an ikuv until that moment. That means really the zrikas hadam, the carbon, and the spritzing of the blood on the mizbech. That's what affects the kapara. So if we ask, at what moment is there kapara? At b'shas zrikas hadam. But it's nisakev, it's held up until the kohen eats it. And therefore, he says the halacha is that if somehow the carbon became nifsal and the kohen can't eat it, we don't say, oh, so there's no kapara. We say there is a kapara. Since no kohen is obligated in eating it, then there is no hold up anymore because the carbon is complete. Now the carbon's complete. The zrika did the kapara. But if the eating is what affects the kapara, so then you lost out. A kohen didn't eat it. He didn't have the kapara. If you learn it's really the spritzing of the blood is what does it. You have to wait till the end of the whole maisa carbon, till the kohen eats it. And then it really is effective. Okay, so if the kohen doesn't eat it because he can't eat it, because it was nifsal, so then it makes sense that, okay, so that's the end of the kapara. That's the end of the carbon, because there's nothing else left to do. So then it becomes a kapara. So if you look at Rashi doesn't say kihecha to have a kapara, period. But rather Rashi says kihecha to have a kapara shlema so that the kapara can be complete. Now you can say shlema means going on the kapara, that the kapara is a complete kapara. Or you could say that it is now finalized. The kapara should be finalized. Meaning the kapara is done through the mice of spritzing, but it's not final until the carbon is complete, until the kohen eats it. And that's what it means. Shei kaparasa shlema, so that it can complete and finalize the mice carbon so that the kapara can take effect. But that's why by a mace, that Yotzei Lehari, it will retroactively work as a kapara. So it's true, the Kohanim are going to eat later, or Matzah Yom Kippur, the Kohanim are going to eat later. But that's effective, that's allowing the kapara to take effect on the moment that it was spritzed. The Maisa kapara is the time it was spritzed.
Finalizing of the kapara actually a kapara on the person who's bringing the carbon, or is it maybe a kapara on somebody that's sold in the first place? Completely, because it seems like if you're finalizing it, then you could say, okay, 99% was done with the 0%, but then there's 1% or whatever it is to finalize it when you're eating it. So something else must be happening because you can't finish. Then you're not getting the same level of kapara.
Well, I don't know if you're not getting the same level of kapara. It's sort of like you get the schar, you get the kapara for the bringing of the carbon and spritzing of the blood. However, you have to finish it. You have to complete the maisa carbon. And if there's something to eat, then the maisa carbon is complete when it's eaten. If there's nothing left to eat, so the maisa carbon is complete when you spritz the blood.
But clearly, it's a higher level to be able to eat it.
I don't know how to define higher level. It's the correct way, right? It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate. But if it became nifsal, it's still valid and it affects the kapara necessary.
Yeah, so I guess that's why I just wonder if there's a part of it, whatever minor part of it is a kapara that's not necessarily, let's say,
On the specific.
Not on the specific act, but maybe I'm going to assault, meaning kapara in general. That's the final one. I have no idea.
Yeah.
It seems like there's something else which
Another
clearly
component
if the
happening.
mace can't have it, then clearly somebody who's living is given.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea because by chatas, it's specifically the carbon that a Yerush cannot bring. Right? If the person died, a person is mechuyev in a chatas, and he separates a chatas and dies, nothing to do with that carbon. So it's an interesting thing. But yeah, your point is important. That something has to be happening with achila that beyond the carbon.
Something's changing in some world somewhere.
Well, yeah, that chilek. Yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit about menachas, about this mitzvah. The Gemara also says, and the other way as well, that could and that the havamina was that it could be chametz and kamashmal, and that it can't be chametz, and what exactly would be the matzah here? So we went into. If you do baking it after you did a chalita, after you cooked it, so that's in Hilchos Matzah. The next Mishnah. Correct. The way they would translate that is not that line. Ratzahu oichla, he and his mishmar. Ratza kayin acha oichla, not in the mishmar at all. That's not the simple reading. Rashi Taka learns who kayin shabbat avedasa, right? And Taisa says no. Hader shira pei, right? L'chol b'nei Aaron tishke oisa mishmar oisa beisav, and that would be okay. It's not the simple reading of the words, but that's the way they would learn. The next Mishnah is really very sadistic in Yevomos and very sadistic in understanding a lot of what we saw. If we hop back to Daf Chav Daled, we have a Mishnah that really repeated itself over here. Mitzvah begadol. The Daf Chav Daled, the Mishnah. Mitzvah begadol yabim im kadam hakaton zochel. And really, it's sort of a Mishnah reminiscent of last week's Mishnah. Mitzvah begadol yabim l'ratzim hachana kala achim. A very similar halacha, that Mishnah. But over there, we have a pasuk. You learn from v'haya habachar that the mitzvah is begadol. And this is relevant because over here, when we look at how do we know whether he's Yerush or not, and whether he gets another portion or not? Also, Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn it from Vahaya Bechor or not. Does he count as a Bechor? So I think it's relevant to have these two shitas in how to understand the word Vahaya HaBechor. Is that telling me the oldest, or that he becomes like a Bechor, he gets Pishnai? Anyhow, so the Mishnah says, somebody did Chalitza, he didn't do Yibum, so he's not going to lose out any of the Yerusha. He's going to be Yerush, the same as everybody else. And the Gemara is going to say, so what's the Havamina? Why would we think that he would lose out? The Gemara says we would think he would lose out because he ruined the opportunity for Chalitza. Right? He ruined the opportunity for anybody to do Yibum. The Chrenim asked, what do you mean? He didn't do anything wrong. The Archaner asks, he didn't do anything wrong. He's the first one, and he's supposed to do it. So they say, well,
the last mission we still said that it's still better if the
younger one does. So he ruined that.
He ruined the opportunity for all the brothers.
Right, but who said that happened? Maybe he actually said to the younger one, do it, and they didn't want either. So that's why Chalitza went back to him. He says, I don't want to do Yibum. So they would have gone. I could just right? We have to imagine what, based on the last Mishnah, what would be going on. He says, I don't want to do Yibum. So the next one, you want to do Yibum? No. Do you want to do Yibum? No. All right, so the first one, you do Chalitza, and we would punish him.
The Knas is their abundant.
Well, there is no Knas. The Knas would have been.
The Havmina was
Derabanan, I assume.
I can't say it. Throw that in. The Knas, moving short, like meaning, made the face that the Knas is even if.
So you're saying even if he was Kadam and he went ahead and did Chalitza, knocking someone else out.
No, so if he knocked someone else out, that's when we would have had Havmina with the Knas.
And this tells us that even in that case, not. Okay.
In that case, not.
Okay. Perhaps it's not. It's not. I mean, the Aruch says that you would have to come up with a case. It's not so clear that there would have been that he did anything wrong. The assumption the Gemara is making is that he did something wrong here. I mean, he didn't. He others could have done Yibum too. He never blocked. Like the Gemara is assuming a scenario. No, it's better for the younger one to do Yibum than the older one to do Chalitza. That we should let the Gadol do whatever, but he's ruining the Iker mitzvah for everybody. That's what the Gemara is saying. That would have been the Havamim, right? Not better. He's Kadam. Doesn't mean it's better. Kadam meaning it's his right first. I don't think you understood that to mean in the hierarchy of optimum.
Yeah. What's right with it?
No, I don't think that. That's the shita. The shita is his right is first.
So even so that Monty said how the art is still explain how they're being done.
Yeah, because he's ruining the Iker mitzvah. The Iker mitzvah is to establish a household. But V'haya B'chor tells me he gets the first rights to define the mitzvah. But he's defining it in a way that's destructive to the household. Okay, so then the Gemara says there, if he actually does Yibum, the Mishnah says, so Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim disagree here. Rabbi Yehuda says it goes to the father, and he doesn't inherit, and the Tanakama, which is the Chachamim, says that no, that he does inherit. And the Gemara goes into what's the Havami, what is the halacha, and what's the reason. So look at the first line. Hakadosh is Yevimta, the third wide line. My timer. Yakum al Shem Achiv Amarachmana Varekam. He shall establish himself in place of the brother, and he did. So he inherits it. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, and Rabbi Yehuda says he doesn't. It goes to the father. So first, Ula and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha said Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda, and he said, what's the basis of Rabbi Yehuda? The Rabbi Yehuda, the one who gives birth, the Bechor, which we learned, as I showed you in Daf Hashavua, and we learned that that's according to that Gemara, that's the source that tells us that the oldest has to do Yibum. Here, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that's a source to tell us that he becomes like a Bechor, that he inherits the father. Ma Bechor ein le b'chaya av. He doesn't inherit his brother, he inherits the father. So too, Av Hai Nami ein le b'chaya av. So the Gemara says maybe he should get Pishnayim. Lacha Misas Av. Av Hai Noitel Pishnayim Lacha Misas Av. The Gemara says no. Yakim Hashem Aviv Ksiv, Yakim Hashem Achiv Ksiv, V'lo Hashem Aviv. And so he doesn't inherit from the father double. I'm going to stop here because the conclusion of this Gemara is that we say he does not get a double portion. When he inherits, if the father was alive, when he inherits, he does not get a double portion. Huh? Right, he doesn't get another portion. He just gets his own portion. He gets like anybody else. Well, right, and it says that he doesn't. So if we go back to Daf Hashavua, at the end of that Gemara, right before the next Mishnah, Rashi over there says, so what is the comparison to Bechor? He doesn't take Ro'i Kubamuchsak. He like a Bechor who only gets his portion. If it's Ra'ui, meaning it's Muchsak, meaning it's in the possession already of the father, a Bechor, oldest, gets a double portion if it's in possession. But anything that's Ra'ui, that means the father has debts that are owed to him, that part, the Bechor doesn't get a double. So too, the Yavam does not get only from a Muchzik, not from Ra'ul. Zak Rashi. Only what's already in the hands of the father when the father dies. Af Yavam. So to a Yavam. What is the halacha of a Yavam? Hanoitil pishnayim b'nechsei, who takes a double portion in the father's possession. Which two? Chelkai, his own portion, v'chelik achiv shames, and the portion of his brother that died. He does not take a roy, he only what the brother already has in possession. So we have a problem. Our Gemara says clearly that you'd think he gets a double portion, Kamash and he doesn't. And in Daf Hashavua, Rashi says he gets. So what's going on? Who's Chelek? His and Achiv Shemes. Meaning he's not the oldest, but Bechor tells me he's like the oldest, and he gets his portion and his brother's portion. And that's what our Gemara seems to be saying he doesn't get. That is that case that a Bechor would get as if there's another brother there. He also is getting as if there's another brother there when there isn't.
I don't necessarily think that's the same, right? If you look at it like, one way is that you split it up evenly, and the Yavam gets his own share, and then he gets the basic share, right? But the other way is that the same way of a regular Bechor, where first you get 2 times and the rest of the put the rest evenly. At the end of the day, you look at the Altus and
it's the same. It's just like you just have another brother and he gets two portions. And Rashi over here says that that's the Havamina, that he would get his portion and his brother's portion. And over there he says that's the Maskana that he gets it.
I haven't noticed that. It's possible that he's getting it, maybe get the second portion for a son. But he has a son and then it's his brother's
Interesting
share.
idea. I mean, it's not mashma in the Gemara. Right, it's mashma even right away he gets it. Right away he gets it. But it's interesting. Right. Anyhow, so the Ritva says Rashi was careful about this. Actually, the Gra over there asked the question and says that others learn not like Rashi. And the Gra in Shulchan Aruch says Rashi was careful about this, but really it's in the Ritva already. If you look at the Rashi by us, Af Hainami. So the Gemara says maybe he can get a Pishnayim who la'acha misas ha'av imesa av la'acha yibumai shalzeh. After he did a yibum, Moide Rabbi Yehuda the noitel zeh chelik v'chelik achiv. Therefore, it says that al Bechor al shem aviv al shem achiv and not al shem aviv, that he doesn't get it. Who's that? That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gra basically what they're saying is, if you look at our Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda has a different mahalach in the word Bechor. V'haya Bechor, our Rabbi Yehuda says V'haya Bechor, that he's a Yerush. He's inheriting his father. He's not inheriting the brother. The Gemara over there says no. That V'haya Bechor tells you that he is like a Bechor, that he is the first in the mitzvah, and he stands in place of his brother. So therefore, there are two different interpretations of the word Bechor. Rabbi Yehuda, which the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda over here. The Gemara in the Maskana says halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. He's going to learn, I think, that he gets a double portion, that he gets his chelik and the brother's chelik, and the answer is he doesn't. And however, the Gemara over there is going not like Rabbi Yehuda, has a different interpretation in a different drasha in the word habachor. And for that, we say to Enochanami, he is Yerush Chelkoi B'Chelek of Achi. So if that's the case, so what was the Havamina Maskana? How would that change in the Havamina Maskana? So they say that the Chilik, the Havamina Maskana over here is that Rashi would have thought, and the Meiri says this, it's not so mashma Rashi, that Rashi would have thought that maybe he gets 3 portions. He gets the portion, the Rashi learns that the Gemara thought. Maybe he gets his portion, his brother's portion, and as his brothers, he gets his brother's Pishnaim as well. So he should get 3 portions, his own plus Pishnaim. That, he said, no, he only gets his...
We're not just adding it to his brother. His brother's a Bachar.
If his brother's a Bachar, he would get 2. Kamash Malan, he doesn't. That's the way the Meiri learns here, and that's the way they want to say that maybe the Havamina of Rashi. However, there's another Mahalach here, and that's really, if we look at the language over here in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, Hakoinis is Yevimtai. Yeah, somebody, you would think that if it says Hakoinis is Yevimtai, he does Yibum, right? He completes the Yibum. He inherits the brother. It should say Yoirish es hames. Yoirish nechasav shel achim. Why did it say Zacha? That he was Zeicha in the nechasim of his brother. So there's a tshuva in Maimonides, and Rebbe Baruch Finkel in his shiurim on Daf Hashavua has a arichas about this in proving this, and he says that really he asks he makes an interesting observation. Okay? We know in the Rambam where he placed halachas, but not only the halacha he says, but where he placed it tells you about how he interprets that halacha. This halacha that the brother inherits the yavam. The Yavam inherits the mace. The Rambam puts in Hilchas Nachlas. Not in Ishus. It's in Hilchas Nachlas. In the halachas of Chesed Mishpat of inheritance, that's where he puts this. And he says, the Lashon of the Rambam is, Mi sheyibem eshes achiv, one who does yibum on the brother's wife, yoresh. Who Yerish Kol Nechse. He's the inheritor, he's the heir of all of the assets of the deceased brother. The Rambam, not paskening like Rabbi Yehuda, says that it doesn't go to the father, it goes directly to the brother. But he says it's Midin Yerusha, which it doesn't say in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says Zeicha. Rambam says Loshen, Hu Yerish. And it's in Hilchas Nachlas. However, the Tur puts it not in Choshev Mishpat in the halachas of Yerusha, he puts it in Hilchas Yibum in Even Ezer. And the language of the Tur also. The language of the Tur is like our Mishnah. He says, "Hamiyabim zeicha benichseya achiv hames." He's zeicha. So the way the lashon of the Tshuva Maimin is, but this idea is that really, if we think about it, the Torah says that if somebody died, he will reestablish the household, and he stands in place of the brother. Look at the lashon of the Gemara. Yokim al shem achiv v'harekam. He stood up in the place of brother. So he's not inheriting. It's not a Yerusha. Rather, he's a replacement. He's filling the shoes of the brother. So all the assets are his. So it's not really a din in Yerusha. What's your question? The Gemara says that he's like a Bechor. No, he's not like a Bechor. Yeah, we're not talking about that at all. Rashi learns that the Tanna Kama is going to hold that it's not a din in Yerusha. You're right. As a Bechor, maybe he gets Bishnai, but not. He's not going to be Yerush. That's if it goes to the father, Midin Yerusha. But the Tanna Kama holds there is no din Yerusha. He's Zeicha benichsei avim. He just accesses it. He merits it. Not a Yerusha. Because if it's Yerusha, you could say, does he inherit it as a brother? Does he inherit it through the father? He's not inheriting. It's a different system. if that's the case, the Baruch says there's a whole sugya if in Yerusha, if you can be masalik yourself, you can say, I don't want it, because there are ramifications to debt, ramifications to many other halachas. You say, I don't want it. I'm masalik. So generally, you say that there is no siluk. So, but the Ktsos HaChoshen in Simon Reish Ayin Ches says that there is siluk for yibum. In the inheritance of yibum, you can say, I don't want I'm doing the mitzvah, but I don't want the assets, and that siluk would work. And Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz explained that the reason for siluk over there, the reason you can do it is because it's not a Yerusha, it's a zikui. And he says that only time that siluk works in a oraisa Yerusha is by yibum. Usually we only say siluk, meaning where I can say I don't want that. I don't want the inheritance. It's only in a Yerusha de Rabbana. But in a Yerusha de Oraisa, there is no siluk. And over here, this is a de Oraisa, and yet there's siluk. So the reason is because it's not really Yerusha. And as Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz explained, that Yerusha of the Rabbanan means it's not inheritance. It's a gift, as it were. It's you access funds because it's the Rabbanan. Yerusha is a Daraisa concept. Midarabanan just means that they gave it to you. Over here too, this is just a zikui. So you don't inherit. If you're not inheriting, it makes sense that you have a right to say, I don't want it. And also it makes sense that over here, he's kambim kaim achiv. So it's not a din in Yerusha. He's just in place of the brother. So what are you going to say? The father died. Then you say, hey, why should he get another portion? He gets another portion because he's himself. And he's also filling the shoes. He's also zeicha. He's been claimed the brother as well. So he comes and says, hi, I'm person A and person B.
The older brother would get 3 portions.
So, that is that meiri, right? That's this idea of meiri. If the older one was a bechar, and ain't a chanami, maybe he would get a 3rd portion.
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
He's
Getting a second, he has to get the 3rd.
That's right, because he is zeicha in the makom. He stands in place of the other.
You get extra halakha of anything else? Like a coin can get double share of truma?
Well, I don't know if there's a din zikui in that, right? Because I don't have to give to any claim. So,
Right. Well, I meant like anything where like there's like a.
and anything that there's a chelik automatic, I don't know what else there is, but anything there's an automatic chelik, that's this vart. That's what the Yagai Ismail is saying. This is the vart that they're saying in this, and that's a beautiful. If you look at the Gemara and you look at our Mishnah, the Mishnah doesn't say he inherits. He's Yerush. It's Zeicha, and it makes sense why the Tur puts it in Hilchas Yibum and not in Hilchas Nachlas.
Or go for anything like in a will as well.
Yeah, because it's not a Yerusha.
But it's when they say he's Zoka, like when he does Yibum, like there's kind of like this brother steps his hand, he said he really he's Zoka everything he has. But then to say 50 years later the father dies, and you say, oh, I'm still hanging on to that Zechiyah such that I can act as if that brother's still alive and collect his hand. That's
He's kambim koim.
He's dead.
He's in place of him.
He's dead.
So
He's not Yorish anymore. That
It's-
doesn't Yorish.
he's kambim koim. He's not dead. He's alive. He was zeicha that space of the brother.
What if he gets married and
Permanently
divorces?
maintain his soul as if he never died. Like
He inherits anyhow. He's kam.
I'm saying,
Vari kam. That's this halacha in Hanami. In halacha is good point. The halacha is even if he divorced her eventually, even the next day, all he has to do is come. He has to kiyokum, right? He has to reestablish the household. He did, and then he is bimkoim of that brother. I don't know if it's a good question. Does he maintain that status to be Yerush from the? That's interesting. I don't know. That's an interesting way. If he divorced her the next day and 10 years later the father dies, he does Yibum, divorces her the next day. 10 years later the father dies, is he also going to have a taina of Zechiyah?
What about all the other people that brother Jewish from?
Or the same. Same.
I mean, well,
The idea is he's
from his
kamim
father.
kaimachid.
He's Jewish from his mother. He's Jewish from his mother.
Yeah, it's kamim.
This
Oh,
guy commented, I am in his place.
that's an interesting question. If he's Yerush from his mother, that's not Hilchas Yibum. There is no Yibum on the mother's side.
That's why I've been asking. Like,
What's the limit? That's a great question. Is there a limit to his being in place of the brother? Is it only in a Yibum capacity? Meaning in the Yibum is only from the father. Yeah, I would say so simply because that's the Gemara in Daf Chavdalet. Gemara in Daf Chavdalet is learning, how do we know? Actually, Daf Yudzayin, the Gemara has, we learn from Nachlas that it has to be the father that does it, right? It's only the brother from the father. How do we know that it's only a brother from the father? Achim min av and not an achim min aim, because it says that nachala, right? So we see that it has to do with nachalas. So it could be that it's only in this hilchas yibum that pertains to the father and not to the mother. I know. I'd have to
start to
be mine. Yeah, that's a great question.
What
How
happens-
far thing?
What happens to the Zika after he gets?
The Zika is gone once the kiddushin, once the marriage is done. The Zika essentially is, this is yours, a gift from your brother, right? A transfer from your brother to you. He completed that transfer, right? That's what Yibum is, a completed transfer. Now it's like his brother could divorce, he could divorce. Huh?
And there's no error because he could marry her again.
Which is the previous mission, no erva, but the next mission is really this halachas of the change of Zika. And so let's actually look at that for a moment. Let's quickly run to the next Mishnah because we're not going to get a chance to go through it. Let's leave him to. Somebody that does chalitza to his Yevomot is usher in all of her relatives, and she is usher in all of his relatives. And there are three categories here. There are relatives that would be usher really in any case because they're related to the deceased brother, right? Meaning his father is all the relatives also. Let's say his father is going to be usher in her, right? Because it was his other brother's wife as well. I mean, you're going to have all relatives that were usher already mikayach the first brother. Then you have the relatives that are now going to be mikoyach him, and then you're going to have shniyas, which is a question in the Gemara. Now, why does it say hacholitz? Even before chalitza, even just Zika, we saw that there's already asa b'kroivim. Laman dama yesh Zika. Zika is strong enough to say that it's asa in her relatives, and she's asa in his relatives, just on the Zika. So, but yes, there could be some difference in rule, but the idea is that Zika is a temporary holding place for Isser. Because as soon as one of the brothers does Yibum, or one of the brothers does Chalitza, even though that all of them had Zika, that Zika goes away. That Isser goes away. But when you do Chalitza, there's a new Isser that comes in. The one who did Chalitza has a new Isser because besides for the Zika, which is just really a temporary placeholder, and as soon as one of them does Yibum or one of them does Chalitza, all of the Zika that the others are going to be gone. The one that does Chalitza, even though he ended the relationship, and he's the one that ended the Zika to himself and to everyone else, he's going to be awesome. And this is going to be an Issa the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan said that even though really they never, because the Zika is trying to transfer the Kiddushin or the marriage from the deceased brother, from the mace, to him, and it blocks it, nevertheless, because it looks like he had a relationship and a divorce, so Chazal said that there's a Isser kurva. Okay, we're out of time. Oh, we have another couple of minutes. I know that's wrong. Okay, so the Zika is going to be the one isser, and then you're gonna have another isser, which is the isser of the kurva of the chalitza itself, which is the isser rabban. We have here a shaila in the Gemara. Yeah.
Rashi seems to say that like, he's like, why would you go to Japan? Some of his men who were already ushered to her beforehand. Like the mashal, like the Yavam, the Kollel's son, right?
Yeah.
Rashi said that's been told that it would be her you know, canary and his son, right? But he's there, but he's already ushered the Raisa as her first husband, his nephew. Why is Rashi like including like the zeros that are unnecessary?
It's already the uncle's wife that should be usher anyhow. Midaraisa. Right. So we have really it's the whole Mishnah. We have in the Mishnah we have some of them that are going to be usher anyhow, and then some of them are not. But in all, Chazal made an isser of chalutza. That's the way Rashi is saying.
That's what they're saying is that like a person, if she would have to go ahead and marry the son of the Kollel, she'd be over the Issa Deraisa of the fact that he was her first husband's nephew, and also she's her Kollel's son. She would get like an extra movie.
I don't know I don't know the ramifications, but they made a general gzeira of all the relatives of the chalutz, right? Even though. And what nafkamina would there be?
Why is Rashi feeling this thought to like how he?
Well, because the Mishnah.
Why say like skip over this one? He's already also Deraisa. Skip this one. Why is it then?
So then, why did the Mishnah list this?
I would have said if I didn't see Rashi, the Mishnah's giving me a full list of this program that are usher. Have to be some of them are already usher. But like once you give me the list, like and also matches with the other list, the first list of the women that are usher to the Kollel, right? But then Rashi starts telling me what their abanans, what those are on, like what like that doesn't fit with that how.
Yeah, I'd have to be mine.
Yeah.
I didn't look at it. That's a good question. Is asking why did if we have the Issa Daraisas already on some of them, so what do we need Issa Darabanan for that? What's it adding? I don't remember. Maybe the Gemara later. I don't remember. The last lines in the Mishnah. So you have the tzara. So we're going to have two ways. If it's the relatives of the tzara, which really are there's a zika on them, on the tzara. There we did make a gzera. The other way we did. So what's the case? Reuven died, and he has two wives. Both have a zika to all the brothers. As soon as one brother does chalitza to one of the wives, then everybody else's zika is gone. But for the moment that the chalitz had zika, he had zika to both wives, and zika to both wives means that all the relatives of the both wives would be usher. As soon as he did zika to one, the other isurim left. As soon as he did chalitza to one, the other ones left, and he's no longer usher with any of the relatives, even though there was a zika. The other way, if we're talking about the relatives of the chalutz, right? The tzaras of the relatives of the chalutz, which the tzara of the relative of the chalutz. That means he did chalitza on the wife of his brother. She has a sister who is in a double marriage, right? In a marriage of two wives. That he's also in the sister and in the sister's wife, and the sister wife, the tzara. Now there was no zika ever to that person, so Rashi explains a new type of a new thing, because who shows up for the chalitza to help her out? The sister, the relative, the mother. So they look like they're a part of the chalitza, so their tzaras are also going to be awesome. It's not an evil.
No, when do we ever see a tzara?
It's a Rabbanan. This is a Rabbanan because of optics. Rashi says it's an optic gzera. It just looks, because people see these people walking into the Beis Din. It's a very unique thing. Even though that in Svara would be just the opposite, because in Svara, the relatives of the Tzara were actually once Aser during Zika. So you think that the Rabbana goes to that the Mishnah says, no, that's mutter. But the woman has no shaykhs to this marriage and to this yibum to begin with. The tzara of the relative, that's going to be Aser because of the optics. It's not consistent, right?
Why never go there on Torah of when there's a person, unless you make your brother. So like, why is this the one time? All these surim, right?
Because of the optics.
Arab Namish marries a man. Well, optics. The Arab Namish marries some random Nafri, and another wife. That other wife doesn't come Nasr, right? If my Arab.
Yeah, but he never did it. No, that's the Vard, because he didn't do anything with it. There was nothing done.